Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
Hi, this is David Grice and Troy Sincock. We are back again talking about all things inspiring from the world of innovation, David. And I tell you what, we have got a cracker show today.
I just can't wait to get our next guest in, because really just an amazing guy that's gone from being a political advisor and now at the helm of this organisation that's doing some incredible things for South Australia. David Pearson's from the Don Dunstan Foundation, who've relaunched the highly successful Adelaide Thinkers in Residence program, attracting experts from all around the world whose knowledge, skills and creative ideas provide guidance to the community, governments, industry and academics.
And for those of you that are listening to the program on the other side of the world, well, Don Dunstan was a really, really influential guy in our hometown. He was Premier of South Australia twice. And when we reflect on that time, it was known as the Dunstan Decade, mainly because of all this incredible innovation that he ushered in, which we're still feeling the effects of today.
Oh, absolutely. And just it's not just the innovation, but the change that came as a result of the innovation that happened. You know, his socially progressive administration saw Aboriginal land rights, for example, being recognised for the first time. Homosexuality was decriminalised. He got the first female judge appointed. And there's so many different things that Don Dunstan actually did for our state.
Yeah, during his time there was the first Indigenous governor. He abolished the death penalty, really relaxed censorship and drinking laws, changed the voting age to 18. Not only that, but Adelaide and Asia, particularly China, have really close ties in terms of trade. There's a lot going on there with international students being in Adelaide and that kind of thing. He kick-started that, and and Adelaide's really known for its food and wine, and he really saw that as something to celebrate as well. Now that happened back in the late 60s and 70s, and we were really defined by lots of those things which he brought to the fore.
Yeah, we really are, and we're still enjoying the fruits of those now. I mean, the food and wine culture that we have, the music and the art and the festivals and things like that are now in our state that never were before.
It's going to be really exciting to hear about what the Don Dunstan Foundation's up to. But now here's Claire with more in news, including a story about how Amazon are tracking their warehouse workers. What else have you got for us, Claire?
Thanks again, David and Troy. This week, I'll be talking about an extraordinary discovery at NASA. But first, exercising is set to become virtual. Startup Verzoom, which is based in Massachusetts in the US, wants to make virtual exercising the new health craze. They're selling exercise bikes that come with VR headsets. This means that while you're sweating bullets, you'll no longer have to wish you were somewhere else, because virtually, you will be. Whenever you pedal, the technology will translate it into movement in the virtual world. But it doesn't just transport you to another world or environment. You can choose to do things like go horseback riding in the Old West while trying to catch bandits. Recently, Verzoom announced they've secured $5.5 million in funding, which will help them develop the technology further. Although the thought of wearing a bulky VR headset while working out is somewhat ridiculous, the design will most likely improve to ensure users enjoy a more comfortable workout. At the moment, the bikes are selling for about $400 and the first orders will be delivered next month. Rare dinosaur and mammal tracks have been found at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland in the US. According to the most recent Scientific Reports journal, over 70 dinosaur and mammal tracks have been discovered, which were created over 100 million years ago. It's an important find because it's one of only 2 known sites to have such a large concentration of tracks. It also has the world's largest mammal track from the Cretaceous period. In an unlikely sequence of events, they were spotted in 2012 by dinosaur expert Ray Stanford. Ray was dropping his wife Sheila off at the NASA site where she works when he saw a pile of rocks on a hill near her building. When he got a closer look, he found the 30-centimetre wide collection of tracks on a piece of sandstone the size of a kitchen table. The tracks belonged to over 8 different species of dinosaurs and mammals, including one set made by a baby dinosaur. Some were from tiny animals and others were made by dinosaurs the size of tanks. Researchers are using the tracks to record the activity of the animals and their interactions. Speaking of tracking movements, Amazon has patented a device that can track the movements of its warehouse workers. The technological bracelet can accurately and precisely track where a worker's hands are and uses vibrations to coax them in the right direction. Amazon's aim is to increase workplace efficiency and ensure orders are processed and prepared quicker. When you order something from Amazon, a worker receives the details on a little handheld computer device that they carry around the warehouse. They then have to quickly find the item in the huge inventory warehouses and put it in packaging so it's ready to be delivered. While the company's intentions might be good, it does mean less privacy and more surveillance. It's also another step towards turning their stressed out workers into bots who work alongside actual robots. A 2016 BBC investigation found that Amazon was pushing their workers to the limit by using technology to increase productivity. Before you know it, devices like these could become mainstream. So if you're a slacker, you might be in trouble. And that's what's in news this week.
Thanks, Claire. Well, David, how would you like the idea of your whereabouts being tracked no matter where you went in the workplace?
I don't know that I'd like that very much, especially when you're, having bathroom breaks and different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think it's my employer's right to know that, I'm sitting on the toilet if I was.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of it, I can kind of get where their thinking's going in terms of, if a worker's looking for something in a warehouse, that this bracelet using vibration can get you to the place where the item that you need to pick off the shelf is. So I kind of get that, but if it's about tracking your movement through the warehouse and keeping tabs on you, then I think there's going to be a fine line there that the company's going to have to draw.
Yeah, I reckon that's a fair call. I just remember working in a supermarket, every time there was a price check, it was inevitably the hardest to find item. That was, you couldn't work out what aisle it was. It was the thing that, you didn't normally stock. And, looking for it was really inefficient trying to find the thing.
Yeah, I do like the idea, though, that they have a handheld computer that goes with them. So that sort of works in conjunction with this vibrating bracelet. But, I agree. I think finding things, especially in a warehouse the size of Amazon and the product range that they have. I mean, you can imagine a supermarket that we have here, there's thousands and thousands of items there. How many items does Amazon have?
And what's your thought about humans sort of becoming more like robots? These days we don't have to really remember telephone numbers or information that we used to keep in our heads. This now is potentially having a worker not have to use their brain quite as much. They literally could be guided by the technology.
Yeah, I've got a few issues with that because, how long is it going to be before we don't have to think about doing anything, and I think we still have to have something that ignites our brains to keep us sane. And we look at the onset of things like Alzheimer's and things like that, it's because the inactivity of the brain is really, starting to diminish. And then if a machine's sort of telling you what to do and when to do it, I think, is that going to change our existence, or is it going to mean that we're going to have more room in our brains to fill up with other stuff?
And goodness knows there's a lot up there in my head right now that is pretty damn useless. David Grice and Troy Sincock, we're talking innovation on The In Show. You can check us out at theinshow.online, Facebook, and follow The In Show on Twitter as well. Now, coming up next, we talk about the Don Dunstan Foundation's Thinkers in Residence program and how the man in the driver's seat has transitioned from advising the Premier to a sharp focus on social capital.
The In Show. It's all about innovation.
Hi, I'm Wendy Perry from Workforce Blueprint, and you're with Troy and David on The In Show.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock. If you've missed an episode, make sure you subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. The Executive Director of the Don Dunstan Foundation, David Pearson, has gone from Senior Advisor to the South Australian Premier to championing the Adelaide Thinkers in Residence program, attracting experts from around the world and providing guidance to community, government, industry and academics. The next residency is focused on social capital, David.
Yeah, it is. So it's a bit of a strange phrase, social capital, but it's deliberately chosen to avoid all the buzzwords that you get in innovation, and particularly social innovation. So we didn't want to call it the social enterprise residencies because that's a bit narrow. We didn't want to call it the corporate social responsibility residencies because that's a bit of an old-fashioned concept too. So we went with the social capital phrase because we wanted to go for the sort of crazy, bold ambition that we think South Australia should be known as the social capital of Australia, that we have a history of social innovation, that we are a place in the world that was no good reason why we're here other than a bunch of dreamers escaping from industrial England came to South Australia and created what they wanted as an ideal, really, as a better society. And so That's why we named it the Social Capital Residencies, because we want Adelaide to be as well known for social innovation as places like Tamworth is for country music and Geneva is for diplomacy.
And so is there a sense of, carrying on the work that Don Dunstan did back in his day?
Absolutely. That was part of the framing for the sort of social capital name for the residencies. It built on a lot of the work that was done by the Social Capital Network that Matt Anderson and David Patterson started in South Australia. But really that vision of South Australia goes right back to our founding, and the sort of modern founding after the land was dispossessed by our Indigenous brothers and sisters. But when those first settlers came out here, they came with that vision of a dream, and that was developed. And Wakefield turned what was Ghana land into agricultural land. Playford turned that agricultural economy into an industrial economy, and Don Dunstan turned it from an industrial economy into a services economy with arts and design and those sorts of things, and premium food and wine and tourism and that sort of stuff. So that was a fundamental transition, and we're in that next transition phase now from that sort of services economy into the information. There's 3 or 4 different revolutions going on now. It's hard to pick out which one we're going through, but there's a definite transformation going on at the moment. And what we're saying is we want that transformation to benefit everyday people. We want it to help improve the lives of everyone who lives in this great place that we live. And that if we can be really good at that, then we can help others around the world do it. And that can be our advantage.
If you were to just unpack what social capital means, because we hear that sort of buzzword or word a lot. Can you just sort of explain what that is in fairly simple terms for us?
So, I mean, we're playing on words here. So the social capital thing is like, well, we have financial capital, we have human capital, and we want to build social capital. And that sort of the theoretical basis behind the phrase social capital was really pioneered by a guy called Robert Putnam, who put that book out called Bowling Alone. And it really outlined this idea that in Western societies, we're all going to bowling alleys and bowling alone. We're not joining things anymore. No one's in Rotary clubs. People don't join political parties. That bonds that build community are breaking down. And so that idea of social capital is how do we measure that? How do we build that up? And so we're wanting to build that. We're wanting to build social capital in that sense. But we also want to be the sort of capital of Australia in terms of social innovation. And so it's that play on words. It's both those things.
It's part of the Thinkers in Residence program. Can you explain exactly what that is? I mean, it's been around for a while, then it disappeared, and now it's back.
Yep.
And from my understanding of the program itself, it's been absolutely revolutionary across so many different industries.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was really pioneered by the government of South Australia, and Mike Rann set it up. And what it was to bring experts from around the world to Adelaide to help us deal with different challenges. And so they brought out a person called Roseanne Haggerty, for example. She was an expert in homelessness in the US. And when she came here and provided her advice, and she came here not just for a day or two, but for an extended period of time, and she helped transform the way homelessness services were delivered here in South Australia. And we reduced homelessness in South Australia while the rest of the country increased it in terms of rough sleeping, that was. And that was a consequence of her residencies, but also all the work that everyone did here in South Australia. So the idea is that rather than just getting experts that come to South Australia, come in, talk to a few of us, inspire us, we all thought that was interesting, they go home and nothing much changes. They go home and knowing that that they're going to come back, and all the people they engage with go, hang on, we better do something about this. And so the next time they come back, they go, what did you do? How'd you go changing the way, with Roseanne, for example, the homeless services are delivered? And then they did it again a third time, and then they put a report out with recommendations to government, and government acted on those. And with the Roseanne residency as the case study we're using, they created the Common Ground model of homeless services, and hundreds of millions of dollars have gone into Common Ground facilities all across Australia now. So that's just one example of how the Thinkers program was used, but there's many more.
Explain to me why there's great value in people from outside the city providing their perspective. I could imagine that for some it would look like something that's quite excessive. Aren't there people here that know what could be done?
There absolutely are, and it's really a pragmatic program to say, look, we have amazing expertise. We have the world's best knowledge here. Very rarely do these thinkers come here and tell us something we don't already know. But in fact, what it does is it gets everyone locally to park their institutional or their personal egos and say, how do we look at what this issue is more broadly? And the outside person acts as a catalyst. So it might aptly be named the Catalyst in Residence program. That might be a more descriptive version of what it should be called. But, the Thinkers name already gets a bit of a laugh about it. So the catalyst in residence is even more of a mouthful. But that is really what they do. They act as a catalyst. And so no one's a prophet in their own land. All the experts we have in South Australia, the rest of the world often want them. And then we don't listen to them here. It's a unique South Australian thing. So it's accepting that and trying to turn it on its head.
Mm-hmm. But on top of that then comes also the fact that the international minds and the experiences of others can often bring a different perspective as well, can't it? So, and I think
thinking
that's
outside your box,
absolutely
your day-to-day life that you live in, and you might be an expert in homelessness, or you might be an expert in agricultural supply chain, as one of the thinkers focused on. But you can't get your colleagues to change, or you haven't thought about the issue slightly differently. So they help you change your thinking. They help others change their thinking, and they help us change the way that the systems work rather than just individual issues.
So obviously the homelessness one is one that had very significant impact.
Yeah.
Are there any others that come to mind that have made such huge impact as well?
Yeah, I mean, like any program has its hits and misses, and some of them weren't as successful as others. Some of them were wildly successful. I think that homelessness one definitely was. But, I mean, we had Jeff Mulgan, who focused on social innovation, and that led to the Australian Centre for Social Innovation being created, which is something all South Australians should be proud of, but very few South Australians know about. It's an amazing organisation that does really groundbreaking work, and it's an outcome of that program. Or we have Martin Seligman came out on wellbeing and resilience, and that's led to the Samri Wellbeing and Resilience Centre being set up, and us setting for ourselves as a state an aspiration to be the state of wellbeing, where they're the first place in the world to measure the wellbeing of all of our citizens right across the state. They're just a couple, but there's plenty more. Carla Rinaldi on early childhood education and others. So, I mean, one of the things we'd love to do as part of the Thinkers program as well, now that the Dunstan Foundation's taken over it, is have a look backwards about what some of those previous residencies did and say, what else can we do to keep implementing the recommendations? Because I think if there's one criticism I'd make of the government-run Thinkers program, is that because it was government, everyone's expectations were that government would do everything, government would fund everything. And before the global financial crisis, governments had more of an ability to fund a lot of things, like setting up an Australian Centre for Social Innovation. Government balance sheets are in a lot of trouble at the moment from all the GFC and other things, and there's just not that much money out there. So it means all of us in the community have to take responsibility for what we can do. And that's probably the big shift between when the Thinkers program became the Dunstan Foundation's project, that we're really trying to enable people to take responsibility for the actions themselves rather than relying on government to implement them all.
I really like it, as a perspective as well. I remember one radio network I worked for, because it was so aspirational to work for them, that if you got a job and you were originally living in the suburbs, you'd then get that job and move as close to the network as you could, which then stopped you participating in sort of everyday life and created this bubble-like effect where the people that you're actually serving, you ended up being disconnected from.
Yep.
Do you find that it provides an opportunity like that? Yeah, it provides a different context entirely, really, doesn't it?
Does the Thinkers program provide that? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it's helping you get that self-realization. I mean, you picked that up, Troy, that you'd moved and you got closer and you're in a bubble, but people don't often know they're in a bubble. Yeah. They don't think they are. So the catalyst in residence or the thinker in residence, it just pierces those bubbles. It changes the thinking. And in an environment that we're in at the moment where the future is about information and how we can collaborate and work with others as opposed to producing widgets as the world used to be, or it still is in many ways. But our competitive advantage will be in our ability to take new ideas and realise them and commercialise research and those sorts of things. And piercing bubbles and changing thinkings is just as important as the manufacturing tools that we used to use to smash the metal and create cars.
I love the fact that this is sort of being exercised at a time when we're doing lots of things right, rather than waiting until things start going wrong. To be able to get that perspective at a time where it appears that everyone's sort of heading in one direction, and then for someone else to go, "That's great, you're doing it," but you realise there's this other way of doing it as well, just enough to disrupt it. And have you pointing in a different direction and see what is possible.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what the current focus of the Thinkers program is on, this social capital residencies. And what we're trying to do there is take what's often seen as a deficit and turn that into a strength. So the fact that we have an older population doesn't mean that we have an aging burden. It means we've got one of the best lifestyles in the world, that people can live and grow old here. It means that we've got high levels of disability, but that's an opportunity for us to become the best in the world at including people with disability in the cultural life that we have through the arts and culture. And we already are leaders on disability and art. Or it means finding ways to involve people with disability in the culinary life of South Australia. We've got premium food and wine. How do we help other people with disability around the world do that and export that intellectual property? We're world leaders on volunteering. We have high levels of disadvantage. How do we turn that around and become the best in the world at helping procurement systems in government and in the private sector ensure we provide employment opportunities for those who are least able to get into the labour market? And there are people in South Australia who are working in every one of those examples I just gave.
And let alone the minds that, are in the ageing population that are still very incredibly, active and forward thinking and things like that, to harness all of that as well in those sort of aspects is really interesting. And even talking to the RAA, as we did very recently, talking about how they're looking at the future mobility for the ageing population as well, within redesigning nursing homes and retirement estates, so that these people can move around. I mean,
transport's going to be key, and to inclusion. And RAA are thinking about that in a big way. They're one of our partners in the Thinkers program, and they know that the future of transport is going to be fundamentally different. And they're basically an insurance organisation. They're a cooperative. They're one of the most amazing cooperatives we've got in Australia. But they know that their whole business model is going to be disrupted, and they want to find ways to provide that value. So that's partly why they're working with us as part of the Thinkers program too. We're supporting them in terms of making our thinkers available to them and the internal kind of innovation work they're doing. And in exchange, they're helping us bring those thinkers out to the benefit of all of South Australia. So that's probably the other big change on the Thinkers program, is that it used to be run by government and it would provide recommendations to government. Now it's run by the Dunstan Foundation on behalf of the community. And we get a little bit of government money, but no ongoing money. So we've had to turn it into a social enterprise, and the only way it runs is because of the generous support of organisations like the RAA.
How have you found working for an organisation that's run in that way?
Exhausting. Exhausting, but also really humbling, like the fact that there are so many organisations, wonderful organisations who have very little resources but are willing to chip in and help make this project work, because they see that it's of benefit to the state. They see that this is the sort of thinking and the knowledge that we need to get better at and have more of in South Australia. So us bringing these world-leading experts from around the world to help us grapple with these challenges is really important, and it wouldn't be possible without all of those organisations. But yeah, it's hard work going around and banging the doors and wearing out the shoe leather, talking to everyone about it. But same time, it's really invigorating doing it as well.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock on The In Show. We're talking to David Pearson, Executive Director of the Don Dunstan Foundation. And next, we find out how he switched careers and what's been the impact.
Download the Phoner app before you head to your next event. Find people easier, market yourself better, and get connected using Phoner. That's spelled PFONR. Phoner. Available in the App Store now.
Hi, I'm Leanne Isaacson, Australia's most connected LinkedIn woman, and you're with Troy and David on The In Show.
The In Show. It's all about innovation.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock on The In Show. You can subscribe to iTunes and listen to The In Show podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Now, we're talking to Executive Director of the Don Dunstan Foundation, David Pearson, about the Adelaide Thinkers in Residence program. David, what's been your biggest learning curve going from politics to directing a community-focused organisation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't switch the political brain off as much as I try, so I still get outraged about the Donald Trump comments and all these sorts of things. So I've still got that political heart in me. But what it's meant is, when I was an advisor in government, I used to take the sort of 50,000-foot view of South Australia and involve myself in a huge amount of different things and keep informed about what's going on everywhere, kind of thing, or in as many areas as I could as possible. And that helped me do my job in advising, the members of parliament that I work for and those sorts of things. And now, rather than having this really sort of shallow involvement in a lot of things, I've got really deep involvement in a narrower group of things. And so it's just been understanding and focusing on those things and getting used to that's been a bit of a transition.
It's much better for your mental health as well. Given that you're not, way out here and you're now down in a fairly narrower, sort of sphere. I think surely that's got to make life so much easier for you.
Yeah, and then there's a sort of a range of other accountabilities that come with that. So I used to do a lot of commissioning things and getting new projects off the ground and fixing people's problems and helping with that kind of stuff. And now it's working in a really intensive way on a narrower group of issues, which is really rewarding, but it also comes with, I have to deliver on those things as well.
Yes.
That we've got obligations to different organisations that we're partnered with to deliver for them. And so the weight of expectation on that is sometimes quite challenging
quite
too.
Heavy, yeah. And how long do the residencies themselves go for?
So they're all slightly different. So another thing we changed about the Thinkers program when the state government ran it, they used to bring the Thinkers out for 3 or 4 weeks at a time, 3 times over the course of about 18 months, 3 or 4 times over an 18 to 2 year period probably. So they're all slightly different when government did it, and they're slightly different with us. But we've done it where we've got one primary thinker in residence, who's Alison Hewitt. She's the head of social innovation at the Mars Discovery Precinct in Toronto. And so she's been twice for 3-week visits at a time, and she'll be back in June this year for Entrepreneurs Week and for the Festival of Ideas, and she'll be here for 3 weeks then. And then we've had a series of specialist thinkers and residents who've come out for one-off visits. And so when Alison finishes her 3rd and final visit, it'll mean a bit of a pivot point for the Thinkers program. So we're still going to keep running the social capital residencies, but whether or not we have a primary thinker in residence or whether or not we just keep having one-off specialists, that's what we'll work out with our partners, and we're exploring the different options around cooperative thinkers and residents. So we're really looking at who could we have in 2019. Do we focus on sort of creatives and different business models? Do we focus on cooperatives or the future of work? Or, there's a range of things. We want to keep the social capital theme, but have specialist and primary thinkers and residents, so primaries who come for 3 or 4 visits. But really, as I was saying, it's a social enterprise now, so we'll go with what we can get the support to do, really.
I love how nimble and responsive it is, in as much as you're not planned 5 years ahead as if you kind of know what's going to happen, but you can sort of duck and weave as things happen. And it seems, although people are operating in different spaces, they all have some sort of domino effect in some way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people working in these areas already, and there's a lot of, people bring experts to South Australia all the time, right? And so what we're trying to do is add value to that, and do it with a consistent theme, this sort of social capital theme through it. And whilst that's providing value to the South Australian community, whilst we're really making progress in supporting this social innovation ecosystem, as we call it, we'll keep doing that. And so really we want to be nimble and support different organisations and different groups that are out there trying to do things. So Entrepreneurs Week is a group of people. We work really closely with them, or with the Australian Centre for Social Innovation, or RAA, or there's a very large number of them. The universities really are crucial in all of that as well. So we work with the Dunstan Foundation is obviously a creation of Adelaide and Flinders Uni, but we work with UniSA and Torrens University as well through the Thinkers program. So it's really an opportunity to take the knowledge that's already here and make sure that when we bring these experts out from elsewhere, that they're able to provide as much value to local organisations and individuals while they're here as possible.
So with the residency that we're currently going through, is there anything starting to emerge yet, or is it just too early to tell as far as some concepts for taking it forward?
Oh yeah, Alison's put her first report out, so the interim report that she's released is available on the Dunstan website, and then we will release the Susie Souza report and Alison's second report and the Vic Strecker report from last year. So we had 3 visits that we haven't put the reports out for, and we're going to put them all out very soon. And yeah, there's a couple of common themes, I think. Millennials are incredibly important. The brain drain is a big part of sort of the issues that have come up through all of that. And 75% of the global workforce by 2025 will be millennials. But we have less millennials in South Australia now than when I was born.
Wow.
And that is a challenge. But it's also a really important cohort of people, because what millennials show is that they think that the number one purpose of business is to improve society. That was a study that Deloitte did a couple of years ago. It was the first time that had showed up. Not to make a profit, not to employ people, but to make society a better place. That's why we want companies. And so we need to completely think about the way that companies work and their value and their role in society. And they can be incredibly important and powerful drivers of change for the better, not just for profitability and for the, the hope that the profits there will trickle down kind of thing. So in terms of common themes, millennials, the importance to them for South Australia, the importance of innovation and the physical manifestation of where innovation occurs has been a common theme. So we've got innovation precinct in South Australia. Tonsley is world class, but we need a physical manifestation of innovation in the city is a common theme that's come out.
The drain of millennials, I mean, obviously that would be a problem encountered by lots of smaller cities. Is that a concern, or is it about them going that's the concern, or is the concern about finding a pathway for them to return with what they've learned?
Definitely that. I mean, them going is not a problem at all as long as they come back, but they're not coming back. So the idea that it's like no one should ever leave, well, no, that would be terrible for South Australia. I mean, my old boss used to say the two biggest problems about South Australia, those who've never left and those who've never been. And we need more people to come and see what, we have this great lifestyle. But sometimes it's a good thing for people to leave and come back, and we just need to get them back. Yeah.
And I suppose is something like an innovation precinct could be the ticket to do just that.
Yeah, that could help. I mean, I don't think there's going to be one silver bullet. That's a sort of that physical manifestation in the city of innovation. That using that Mars business model, I think, would be really helpful, where you've got the big players in a precinct subsidising the smaller players and that sort of stuff. And it being in sort of community-owned hands, which is not government, but it's the communities, but it's not private either. The other thing that would, I think, help bring them back is this idea that what South Australia is about. And we've never really been clear about that. I mean, we've used in this project the social capital branding, and I talked about how we want South Australia to be the social capital. But Martin Seligman and the Wellbeing and Resilience Centre, they said we want to be the state of wellbeing, and then we're the gig city, and we're the zero carbon city, and the Dunstan Foundation's launched a project on being the zero project city, so for zero homelessness, and this, we're the city of live music. How many things do we want to brand ourselves? And there's a lot of confusion around that. And if we're able to present an image of what South Australia is to the world and to the rest of the country, with a bit more consistency and is able to communicate what a wonderful, vibrant, exciting place that we are, rather than the negativity that's so often cast about us, about, Rust Bucket, all these sorts of things. I mean, we are consistently rated as the number 5 livable city in the world. There are so many things going for us. We need to better tell that story, and I think that'd help make millennials come back as well, because there are so many opportunities in terms of being a place where you can test new ideas and create new businesses and solve problems. If we're able to communicate that, but also I think that test bed city kind of idea, there needs to be some reality to that as well. And there's an aspiration around it, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make that substantive.
So with the Thinkers program, if we push that aside for a moment, what else is the Don Dunstan Foundation involved in?
So we describe ourselves as a sort of thought leadership organisation, and we work on collaborative projects. So the Thinkers is one, and we do all of that, of course, to build on the legacy of Don Dunstan. So the Thinkers is a big project we're doing. We launched late last year an initiative called the Adelaide Zero Project, which is an attempt to use a method for ending street homelessness that has been very successful in the US. So there's about 70 communities across the US who've committed to achieving this thing called functional zero homelessness. And so functional zero is, rather than sort of aiming for this goal of absolute zero, we're going to have no one sleeping on the streets. It's not possible. It's not realistic in the short term. But what you can do is make sure that everyone who comes into the system is known, is identified, and is offered a place and can be given a place, and to make sure that there's more people coming out of the system than are going in. So functional zero, shorthand, is more people being placed into secure housing than are coming into the system. And if you've got that, you're at functional zero, and then you want to sustain it and reduce it over time. And so that's the model they've used in the US. 7 communities have achieved it for veterans and sustained it, and a further 4 have achieved it for chronic homelessness, which is the more comparable version for us. So we're copying that model and trying to make that work here. We're the first city in Australia to commit, the first city outside of North America to commit to achieving this functional zero model. And late last year, we were recognised by the Institute of Global Homelessness as leading the way as being one of 12 vanguard cities in the world.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
That. Yeah, so we've done a lot of work, and we've got a lot more to do, because we actually need to start improving the lives of the people who are sleeping on the street. But the idea of this model is to change the system. So this isn't a new housing service or a new service model. This is about making everything that already exists work better and helping those people that are in that system.
Gee, such exciting times, isn't it? What I'm loving about the theme of what we're discussing here is the way that creativity is being introduced in all areas. There seemed to be like once upon a time that, if you were in the arts, you got to be creative, and if you wanted to be an accountant, well, you were just subjected to a life of, complete and utter boredom, but you'd make money. This idea that looking outside the box in every respect means that people in, otherwise sort of traditional occupations then get the opportunity to really, stretch themselves, I suppose, and see what's possible.
Absolutely. And I think I kind of picked on this realisation when I started at the Dunstan Foundation, realised all these things we're doing, it's really about social justice and the issues we're focused on, but it's about finding all the other sectors in the economy and all the other industries and all the other professions and getting them to put their shoulder to the wheel and help out with that social justice aim. So when I started at the foundation a year and a bit ago, we weren't really doing anything new in mental health, and that was one of our priorities, is we wanted to help improve the mental well-being of South Australians. And so we were like, well, why don't we do a public lecture and we'll get the experts together? And it's like, well, we get public lectures all the time. Why don't we do something sort of fun about mental health, and why don't we get the marketing community to help us do it? And we'll run like an Ad Mental. We called the event Ad Mental, but we'll run like a grow and transfer style event. Where you get our marketing agencies to make a video, like on the Grow and Transfer, they make a video and say why we should invade New Zealand, kind of something silly like that. Get the South Australian marketing community to make videos about how we can improve our mental health. So we did that last year and got the marketing community together, and they all were so incredibly supportive, and all the mental health sector together, and then we got all the Dunstan Foundation supporters, and we had this event called Ad Mental, and we got the marketing community and the mental health community to work together, who'd never really talked to each other much before. We're doing that again in April this year.
Awesome.
So
is there anything coming up that you're excited about?
Well, April, we're doing the Ad Mental event, which is going to be really exciting. We've got Ilse, who is the former CEO of Mars, is coming out as our next thinker in residence, so she'll be here in April as well. We have in May, we do a narration as part of Reconciliation Week every year, and we're bringing Noel Pearson down from Cape York Institute to Adelaide to be part of that oration. So you got the scoop here. That's announced here first. It's not actually public knowledge yet, but go for it. You can tell everyone.
Awesome.
And so we've got the Thinkers program, and the probably the biggest thing that I'm working on at the moment, and that the team is madly working on, still back in the office actually, is the Zero project. We've got an implementation plan that we're going to release soon as well. So that's been a massive undertaking, and incredible amount of support from different government agencies, all the NGO sector. So that's the next big thing there as well.
Executive Director of the Don Dunstan Foundation, David Pearson, thanks so much for joining us on The In Show.
No worries, thanks for having me.
And if you know an innovator that we should have on the show, drop us a line at theinshow.online, and you can check us out on Facebook and Twitter.
Next week on The In Show.
Well, it's Adelaide Fringe time again, Troy, and we're joined by Director and CEO Heather Kroll, and she's talking about innovating an arts festival and how interactive is becoming a new genre and gaming's influencing performance. And Claire brings us the innovation news from all around the world, and who knows where the heck she gets those stories from, Troy.
Yeah, that story about humans sort of becoming a bit more robotic at Amazon, that's really got me a bit concerned.
Yeah, me too, I've got to say. Although I did like last week's story about Elton John, going into the world of AI and VR.
I think if we could just give up the show and end up having a virtual David, a virtual Troy, and then we could just sit back at home while our virtual selves do this program.
Well, I don't know. I'm having too much fun.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. You can check out theinshow.online and subscribe to iTunes, listen to the podcast, and rate us 5 stars if you've enjoyed what you've heard.
Now, to finish up, here's Emma Hack, who's a world-renowned body painter and artist, and she's talking about the importance of community when building your business.
As I'm older now, I think the way that we created back in the day and the way we create now are two very, very different things. So back in the day, I think people were very solitary, and that's the way that we did it, and it probably came from the 80s more than anything. It's like, survival of the fittest, blah, 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 get in, get out, do what you got to do and not really care about other people so much. But I think now business is a lot more open, and it's, like when you go into businesses and everybody's sort of working together, and it's all very open environment. So the real innovative businesses do that. And it's where I'm heading with what I'm trying to do in my gallery as well, creating community, because you can only be just as strong being one person. But if you've got 100 people behind you and everybody is thinking in a similar way, or in a way that, they want to help other people or be a part of something. And I think because we live in this world where social media really alienates people. Like, I think those conversations don't get had that used to be had, like where everyone would catch up and have a drink or whatever. Now you look at tables and people and they're all sitting on their iPhones. And that whole disconnected society, I think when it comes to creating a work environment, people are really desiring more. And I think if you're smart in business, you'll be buoyant. Be innovative in the way that you can open to change, open to letting other people in, but protect yourself. I always give people little tests to see, where they sort of sit in my life and, how much I can rely on them. And then if I can't rely on them, then don't expect too much from them, and that's where they sort of sit in that little land there, and that's okay, they don't have to be anything more than that. Mm-hmm. But the ones that do want to give, then find ways that you can give back to them and how you can sort of, I guess, create a better life for each other, or, introduce them. Like, one of the things I really noticed when I was overseas, in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was never done here, was that, I'd be somewhere and talking about what I did, and people were like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like, I can introduce you to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I think the real big problem with Australia back then was no one did that. But I think we held everything because there wasn't much, like, you're fighting for things here as well so much. So, yeah, but I think Australia is now changing. And because we're open to dealing with people all around the world now, and, I think, the innovative way of sort of, I guess, creating and involving community and sort of creating this sort of space where people, can add ideas and not feel incredibly judged and all that kind of stuff is really important.
The In Show, presented by David Grice and Troy Sincock. News by Shannon Corvo and Claire Murphy. Music by Zach Grice. Produced by Jason Walker. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.